The president of the United States is in Saudi Arabia right now on the first stop of the first Middle East trip of his second term. The president is taking major investments from the Persian Gulf nations, including, but not only the Saudis, also the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang, who's joining us now from Riyadh. Weijia, so let's talk about the goal of this trip and why it's so important at this very moment.
Well, President Trump always views every relationship with a business lens. And so, of course, he is going to be talking about security concerns in the region, a potential ceasefire for Gaza. But he also wants to make significant deals, business deals with the Saudis. And that is how he frames almost every relationship that he has. And so the Crown Prince here has already said he was going to invest $600 billion into the U.S. economy during Trump's presidency. Trump says he wants that figure to be $1 trillion. The two did sign some understandings today, but they weren't exactly any deals that have monetary figures attached to them. They are more agreements to continue cooperating as two countries, to continue the work together. For example, to have the Ministry of Energy and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the U.S. Department of Energy cooperate in the field of energy, in the field of mining and minerals. And the list actually goes quite long, Vlad, but I am not seeing any price tags, any figures as far as a deliverable goes. But it is important, Vlad, that they maintain this relationship because obviously, Saudi Arabia is a huge ally of the U.S. when it comes to maintaining peace and security in this region.
100%. The other interesting note of this trip, Weijia, as you know, is that there are some high-powered business leaders along for the ride, including Elon Musk. How does the president hope this trip will boost foreign investment into the United States? And what are the specifics as it relates to those business leaders who are joining on this journey?
Well, there is an investment summit here, Vlad, and certainly, perhaps they were going to come anyway, but I do think that the president's attendance and him being here in Riyadh attracted some of those business owners here as well. And it is also a very long list. Uber and BlackRock and Citigroup, the list goes on. They had lunch together at the royal court. And it really is, I think, an opportunity to hear from both the president and the Crown Prince about various different opportunities across sectors, not just one industry, to talk about any potential investments that can be made. But the president really wants to use any platform that he can to try to get more of those investments into the U.S. economy. For example, one of the companies here is NVIDIA that just announced a major, project in the U.S. that the president has been touting now for several weeks.
So, Weijia, finally, let me ask you about this Boeing 747 jet that the country of Qatar is gifting to President Trump this week. The president, in his remarks yesterday, no doubt you were there, suggested that he'd be an idiot not to take a free plane. But, of course, there are members of even his own party who are suggesting that this is problematic. Although Qatar remains somewhat of an ally in the region, they are reportedly funding, for example, Hamas, a terrorist organization in Gaza. And so it's sort of this weird juxtaposition of here in the United States, American citizens are being ordered by their universities or their businesses to not say anything with regards to what is happening in Gaza. And here you have the president of the United States accepting a $400 million gift from a country who's actually funding that terrorism in the state of Israel.
So the Qataris insist that no decision has been made, that it is under consideration. But you are right in that the president says if they were to offer this gift of a $400 million luxury jumbo jet to him, that he would be stupid not to accept it. But there are certainly so many ethical and security concerns that both Democrats and Republicans are voicing. To your point, Vlad, Senator Rick Scott in Florida, who is a Trump ally, says that he just cannot imagine how this plane could be safe. And he said he does not want the president to be traveling on an unsafe plane because he brought up the point as well that Qatar supports Hamas. And, there are other questions, too, about what Qatar could get in exchange. And the president insists it's nothing. It's just a really nice gift. But, for some Democrats, that's hard to believe, and they worry that there will be ethical lines that are crossed. And so, for taxpayers, there's also one huge outstanding question, which is how much it will cost to retrofit this plane. It would be handed over in this, hypothetical situation to the Department of Defense until it is ready to serve as Air Force One. But that takes time and that takes money. So, again, all these questions are unanswered for now, except the one, Vlad, which is whether the president is on board, and he certainly is.
I don't engage often in whataboutism, but I just boggles the mind if you consider if Joe Biden or Hunter Biden was related somehow to this kind of transaction, what the opposition would be saying. Weijia Jiang, always great to have you, my friend. Good to see you on that trip. Thank you very much for joining us.